We damn sure don't want to be a socialist nation. This ain't Denmark. This ain't Finland. This ain't Sweden. This is the United States of America. You roll over to these borders with the vision and the fantasy and the passion that, yo, here I can achieve anything. I ain't trying to be like everybody else. I'm trying to be one-on-one. That's what this is about in America. We don't talk about that enough when it comes to the socialists. Because they're convincing folks that rather than individuals being a problem, rather than lobbyists being a problem, they're trying to convince you America's a problem while their asses are over here profiting from the American system. And the Democrats with their spineless, weak, feckled selves are allowing it to happen.
What's up, family? I hope you all are doing well, staying safe, staying grounded, and keeping that peace in your hearts no matter what's going on out here. Because I know the news cycle can get heavy. I know it can get frustrating, but that's why we're here, to break it down, look at it from different angles, and figure out what's really going on. And today we got a topic that I think is one of the most important conversations we need to be having right now, because the mask is off. I'm talking full mask off. The Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, they have come out publicly with their agenda for 2028. And a part of that agenda includes abolishing the United States Senate. Now, let that sink in for a second. They want to get rid of the Senate, not reform it, not change some rules, abolish it, nix it, gone. And they had one of their co-chairs, a guy named Gustavo Gordo, go on Fox News and basically confirm this. And when a reporter asked AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, about it, asked her directly whether she rejects this idea, she refused to say no. Typical politician, word salad, political games. She refused to distance herself from it. And that right there, family, that tells you everything you need to know about where this movement is headed. So let me walk you through what happened, because the layers to this story are wild. Fox News had Gustavo Gordo on. He's the co-chair of the New York City DSA. And the host starts asking him about the DSA's platform for 2028. And let me tell you what's in that platform. It's not just abolish the Senate. They want to let Congress choose the executive and the judiciary. Basically, get rid of the president and the Supreme Court as we know them. They want amnesty for all immigrants and all deportations, and defund the Department of War, a wealth tax, a Green New Deal. I mean, this is a full overhaul of the American system. A full overhaul. You can't make this stuff up. So the host asks Gordo about his background, and here's where it gets interesting. Gordo's family fled Peru during the Shining Path. That's a Maoist communist guerrilla group, right? Guerrilla group or guerrilla group. You get the point. That was terrorizing the country. So you mean to tell me Gordo's family fled Peru during the Shining Path, where a communist group was terrorizing the country? They fled communism and they came to America for a better life. And the host asks him essentially, why did your family come here if you're now going to push the same type of system they ran from? And Gordo's response is something else. He says, well, the economic situation in South America was caused by capitalism and American imperialism. So basically, his family fled communism, came to America, benefited from the American system, and now he's sitting here blaming America for the problems in Peru. That's the level of mental gymnastics we're dealing with. The host then presses him on the Article 1 of the Constitution. We know they don't like the Constitution. They hate the Constitution, which is the part that creates the Senate. And Gordo starts dancing. He says the Senate is a non-democratic institution. He says it gives too much power to smaller states. He says California has 30 million people and the same number of senators as Wyoming. And the host, to her credit, keeps pushing. She says, well, you got the House for population and the Senate for equal representation, and that's the whole point. But Gordo keeps deflecting. He starts talking about affordable housing and rent control and childcare, and he says, well, in the long term, we want to democratize the government. But he can't bring himself to say the words, I support the Senate. He can't do it. And then the host asks him about government-owned grocery stores that cost $30 million to build. And Gordo says, if a publicly owned grocery store puts a bodega owner out of business, maybe they shouldn't have been in business in the first place. Let that marinate. It seems to me, family, and let me know if I'm wrong because we're having a productive conversation. When communism hurted Gordo, he hated it. But now that it can be a way of monetary gain to benefit from, he loves it. Am I wrong here, family? Because this is what that sounds like. Rules for thee, not for me. It benefits me, so I don't care. Let it hurt thee. In this case, America. A guy whose family fled communism is now saying the government should run grocery stores, and if that kills small businesses, oh well. That's not compassion. That's control. In this case, aka government control. See, family, when they start using control when it comes to grocery stores, that's only the tip of the iceberg, because then it starts to control your lives. If they control rent, then that means they control real estate. If they control real estate, let alone control rent, then that means they control how you live, what you do, and how you do it. Want an example? Why do you think Zohran Mudami, the mayor of New York, said to make sure, and this is just starting with small businesses that they're constantly hammering, to make sure that their thermostat, when it comes to air conditioning, is on 78 degrees when it was a whole heat wave in New York in the middle of the summer, in the midst of summer, still happening right now as we speak. 78 degrees while it's a heat wave outside is literally like blowing heat inside of the business. And not to mention that he also said DoorDashers and delivery services can utilize the bathrooms of those small businesses that they are delivering orders for. So what happens, family, if your air conditioner is on 78 degrees, it's a heat wave going outside, and you got delivery dashers and delivery service individuals basically coming in and out of your store using the bathroom when they please because they are allowed to? Is there going to be any cool air even upheld in that small business? I think not. So what you think is going to happen if they can control the rent and basically take away properties from landlords? So basically real estate, when the properties are government ran, and then on top of that, control the thermostat in which how you conduct your heating or cooling system in small businesses. That's just a start. What do you think is going to happen? And if they can control that, then that means everything else will be controlled. And if you don't listen, that's when oppression, let alone suppression, happens. And if you don't abide, then they take away from you. Isn't that communism? Like dictatorship? The one that they call our current president? So who's really dictating? Let me know in the comments, family. We just having a conversation, but check out this next clip.
Socialists starting to look ahead to the 2028 presidential race after victories in this year's congressional primaries. Their agenda includes getting rid of the United States Senate, letting Congress choose an executive and judiciary to replace the president and the Supreme Court, amnesty for all immigrants, ending deportations, defunding the Department of War, a wealth tax, and passing a Green New Deal, among others issues there that you see up on the board. So with that, we bring in Gustavo Cordillo, co-chair of the New York City Democratic Socialists of America. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, this is a really hot topic right now.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you for being here. We were just talking in the break, and we were saying hello to each other. Your family came here from Peru, really in the middle of the heat of the Shining Path. They were Maoist, communist guerrillas in Peru. So why did your family come to America?
The economic situation in South America and in Peru was in a really bad place. But I think that much of what we could say is responsible for that actually was the imposition of capitalism, and American imperialism in many cases is actually what brings immigrants to the U.S. coming out of Latin America. And
so they come here because they don't like the imposition of American imperialism in the country that they're in?
Yes, in many countries.
So they come here?
in many countries,
That's
you
a
know,
coincidence.
there have been undemocratic coups that have destabilized countries, and that's pushed people out.
Oh, well, you would think they would want to go somewhere that wasn't imposing that on them if that were the case. But, you know, it's interesting because the shining path, if you look at what they wanted to overthrow the democratic institutions in Peru. They wanted to abolish capitalism in Peru. And we see some of those same threads in the DSA in terms of what it stands for. And one of the things is very basic. You know, we've just celebrated the 250th anniversary of the country. And one of the most basic things is Article 1. In our Constitution. Are you in favor of abolishing Article 1 of the Constitution?
No. We support a democratic route to transformative change in the United States. We think that we need to put the working class before the billionaire class.
So you don't want to abolish the Senate, the United States Senate, because that's what Article 1 is.
The United States Senate is an undemocratic institution. It gives more representation to people in smaller states than to the 30 million people in California.
So you've got the House of Representatives, which is population driven, and then you've got the Senate. So every state, if you're a small state, you still get 2 senators, even though you only get maybe 1 congressman, in order to make all of the states have fair representation. So you say, I'm just confused.
When you ask normal Americans if Congress and the Senate and our political system is working for them, most people are very unhappy with the political system, and they say it's not working for them. When we think about the 250th anniversary of the United States, and we think about our proudest moments in U.S. history, I think of times like when ordinary people rose up and they changed the Constitution to abolish slavery, to give women the right to vote.
Everyone's proud of that.
And
that's a nationwide pride in the country.
But back in those moments, those were considered radical movements because those people dared to say we need transformative change in the United States.
Right.
And I
well,
think
we
that
struggle to become a more perfect union. But I just want to ask you again, do you want to abolish the United States Senate? Because you said you approve of Article 1, but then you said you didn't think the Senate works.
We think that the Senate should be reformed, that we should have a more democratic government system. But that's a long-term change that we're seeking. And in the short term, we're focused on issues like affordability, like freezing the rent, which we've just done in New York, like creating a universal childcare system, which we're also taking steps toward doing, like fixing.
That includes also illegal immigrants within that universal health care.
Our energy grid. In 2023 here in New York, we passed the Build Public Renewables Act, which would create publicly owned renewable energy to have a more reliable, cheaper, cleaner energy grid. These are our immediate term demands where...
Yeah, the new Green Deal, which is just streamlining money that is never really efficient or effective, the Green New Deal. Because basically they're trying to use solar panels, which our president has already disapproved. And for the reason why he's pushing drill, baby, drill, because the simple fact is the demand of energy and electricity doesn't meet, the solar panels doesn't meet the demand with the new green-ish. The new green concept of solar panels doesn't meet the demand of how much electricity is being pulled, especially in New York, but just throughout the state. So it's really foolish, and using money for solar windmills from China that doesn't really work effectively. And then you'll just pay for it as a citizen in regards of your tax bill being higher because the cost of energy is going up because the windmills aren't meeting the demand. And who's to say it's going to be windy outside every single day? So, yeah, it seems as though he can't even define or be more definitive when it comes to explaining what the reform actually is. But you actually expect people to really believe what you're saying. It just all seems like streamlining the people in the name of deception to basically make things sound good so they can actually do what they want to do that benefits themselves. Comment down below if I'm wrong.
We do have a long-term horizon where we do want to democratize our government. But in the short term, we're focused on affordability. We're focused on a working class economic agenda. The question is, how does the government become more democratized if the government takes over more of the power? So, for example, here in New York, if you have government-owned grocery stores, right? And that was what Mamdani promised. I know you were supportive of his
election, and I interviewed him here. So they're up, like, breaking ground on one grocery store so far. It's going to cost $30 million to build a grocery store. In what world does it make sense to build a $30 million grocery store and put competitive pressure on the bodegas that are in the neighborhood?
I think that what we saw in the mayoral campaign is the mayor was able to build a movement that inspired people to believe that we could have a government that works for ordinary people, that is actually responsive to the working class.
Inspiration is great, but if you're the bodega owner, how would you feel if the government opened a big grocery store right next to your bodega?
If one publicly owned grocery store that brings prices down in the neighborhood is enough to put someone out of business, then maybe they shouldn't have been in that business in the first.
There you have it, family. You can't make this stuff up. Now, here's where it gets even more revealing. A Newsmax reporter named Kilman Degart asked AOC directly about the DSA's plan to abolish the Senate. And watch how she handles it, because she says, well, I'm not running for any larger office presently. That's a constitutional question. She's dodging. So the reporter presses her. He says, do you support the institution of the Senate itself? And AOC says, we all got our complaints. I don't support the filibuster. I don't support elements of this institution that were founded on Jim Crow. She snorts. She gets uncomfortable. She can't bring herself to say, I support the Senate. Now let's talk about that Jim Crow claim before we get to her clip now, because this is where the historical illiteracy gets exposed, or ignorance, or lack thereof knowledge. The filibuster has been around since the early 1800s. The Jim Crow era started in the 1870s and went into the 1960s. So you're telling me the Senate was founded on Jim Crow when Jim Crow didn't even exist as a legal system until decades after the Senate was established? Doesn't add up. Doesn't add up. And here's the real kicker. When the filibuster was used to defend segregation, who was using it? Democrats. Southern Democrats, to be exact. They were the ones filibustering civil rights legislation. So if AOC wants to say the filibuster has racist roots, she's technically right about how it was used, but she's wrong about who used it. It was her own party. That's the part they never tell you. They never mention that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed with more Republican support than Democratic support, family. It's laughable in a way, just the ignorance. And you're on the party. These people think they're on the right side of history when it comes to the right thing and doing for our country. They're not. Oh, man. They just say the system is racist and leave it there because it's easier than telling the truth. But here's the bigger point. The reason AOC couldn't say she rejects the plan to abolish the Senate is simple. The DSA is backing her. They're her people. They're her comrades. She needs them for her political future. And if she came out and said, nah, that's too far, she'll lose their support. So instead, she dances around it. She talks about the filibuster. She talks about Jim Crow. She talks about anything except the actual question. And that tells you everything. And it's mind-blowing how they always want to say affordable, women's rights to vote and Jim Crow and all that. We are past that anyway. So what are we talking about? You can't say anything besides tugging on the heartstrings to try to make it like you're actually going to yield results when you can't even actually present how you're going to lay out what is beneficial for the American people, let alone the people, as you are a public official that work for the people, we the people. And the simple fact is, you can't sit there and plan out what yields results or even tell the people your plan so we can measure it, because the simple fact is, if they use word solid as a way to sway you instead of actually say what's the truth, then the simple fact is it will be measured. And they don't want you to measure it because they don't want to be held accountable, but they want to stay in power. So they rather tell you what they want you to hear. So then they can easily continue to uphold power. We need to ask serious questions. We need to hold them accountable, and they need to be measurable questions where we can actually see the results. So we, the people, can hold them accountable who you are serving in which we actually put you in office. And the simple fact is you're using our taxpayer monies. So look, she either agrees with abolishing the Senate and won't say it, or she disagrees but won't say it because she's politically trapped. Either way, it's not leadership, it's calculation. So I want you guys to check it out for yourself.
Progressive Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez taking heat after declining to reject a Democratic Socialists of America proposal, one of which is to abolish the U.S. Senate. I mean, nix it. In an interview with Newsmax congressional correspondent Kilmeny Dukart, the New York Democrat instead suggested some elements of that institution are founded on racism.
For more on their conversation, let's bring in Kilmeny, who joins us now live from the Capitol. Good morning.
Krisha, Edie, good morning. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez refusing to distance herself from one of the Democratic Socialists of America's most controversial platforms. Now, when I asked her whether she rejects the group's call to abolish the U.S. Senate, the New York Democrat repeatedly declined to reject the plan. And when I pressed her on whether she supports the institution, Ocasio-Cortez suggested elements of the Senate were racist.
The DSA co-chair suggested that part of the platform may be abolishing the Senate. What are your views there?
I mean, again, I'm not running for any larger office presently. That is, of course, a constitutional question, and I think that's a constitutional question.
You support the Senate, right, though?
Pardon?
You support the institution of the Senate itself, right?
I mean,
as part of the Constitution?
We've all got our complaints. I don't support the filibuster. I don't support elements of this institution that we know, were founded on Jim Crow.
Events here in the Senate drawing sharp criticism.
My view is that you're not going to solve our problems by simply suggesting they can all be solved by abolishing the U.S. Senate.
It's just historically illiterate. I think that a lot of people who are spouting off of this have no concept of American history. They have no concept of what it means to protect individual liberty. And it's a pretty scary turn, I think, for the Democrats.
Well, the exchange, of course, comes after the DSA floated her as a potential early endorsement, presidential endorsement for 2028, and speculation that she sought to brush aside, saying she is focused on the job she currently holds. Edie, Krisha.
This Democratic Socialist stuff is scary, man. It's really, we have to wake up as the people and really make sure these officials work for the people and actually uphold our American values. Because I'm not sure if you guys know that New York Mayor Zohran Moudami was trying to meet with the Iranian government as we are actually handling them within warfare, but it was stopped by officials who stopped the meeting from taking place. But what is a New York mayor doing meeting with another country that is part of this Democratic Socialist movement? But let's talk about why the Senate exists in the first place, because I think a lot of people don't really understand the purpose, and I get it. Schools don't teach civics the way they used to. So let me explain it in simple terms. The House of Representatives is based on population. Big states like California and Texas and New York get a lot of representatives. That makes sense. If you have more people, you should have more voices in that chamber. But the Senate is different. Every state gets 2 senators, no matter how big or small. California gets 2, Wyoming gets 2, Vermont gets 2, Alaska gets 2. And the reason the founders set it up that way is because they understood something that a lot of people today don't. Mob rule is dangerous. If you let the most populated areas run everything, then the concerns of rural America, the concerns of small states, the concerns of people who don't live in big coastal cities, those concerns get ignored. And the Senate is a check on that. It's a balancing mechanism. It forces the big population centers to negotiate with the smaller states. It forces compromise. And the founders were smart enough to know that pure democracy, where the majority always gets whatever it wants, leads to tyranny. That's why we are a republic. That's why we have checks and balances. That's why we have a Senate and the separations of powers within our branches. Executive, judicial, you get it. And the people who want to abolish the Senate, they're not trying to make things more democratic. They're trying to remove the one institution that stops them from having complete control. Because think about it, if you get rid of the Senate, then all you need to do is win the House and the presidency, and you can do whatever you want. No checks, no balance, no small state having a say. Just one party, one ideology, and one agenda running everything. That's not democracy, that's authoritarianism, and they're calling it progressive. And here's the question that none of them can answer. If socialist ideas are so popular, if everybody wants that, everybody wants what you are selling, then why do you need to abolish the Senate to get it? Think about it. If your ideas are truly popular, you should be able to win elections in small states. You should be able to win Senate seats in red states. You should be able to convince people through persuasion and good arguments, but they can't, and they know they can't. That's why they're not even trying to win over middle America. They're not trying to convince people in Wyoming or Idaho or Alabama that socialism is the answer. They're trying to change the rules so those people don't get a vote that matters. That's the plan. Get rid of the Senate, pack the Supreme Court, add states like DC and Puerto Rico that would vote Democrat, change the rules so that the people who disagree with you don't have a voice, and then call it democracy. And that's not democracy, that's a power grab. And it's the same playbook we've seen from authoritarians throughout history. Step 1, control the institutions. Step 2, eliminate the ones you can't control. Step 3, call anyone who objects a threat to democracy, and they are following the script to the letter. And the saddest part is a lot of people don't even see it because they're too busy fighting over cultural war issues that don't matter, while the people in power are literally trying to dismantle the constitutional structure of this country. Wake up, family. This is serious. So here's what I want you to take away from all of this. The push to abolish the Senate isn't about making government more efficient, damn it. It's not about helping working people. It's about removing the barriers to complete control. And when you see people refusing to answer simple questions like AOC, refusing to say whether she supports the Senate, pay attention. A true leader does not lead with confusion. They stand for something, and also standing for something, they are willing to lose something at the cost for standing for the people. And the people won't be confused based on ideology that they can constantly remix to what they want to define it as when it benefits them, leaving the people confused and double-minded and not knowing where to go, because a true leader actually leads with intention where you will know where they go. It's either left or right, right or wrong. If you stand in the middle, you get ran over. That silence is telling you something with AOC refusing to say whether she supports the Senate. She knows the plan is radical. She knows most Americans don't want to abolish the Senate. And the crazy part is she is a congresswoman. So she want to abolish something that she's been a part of because it benefits her. But who's to say that she'll have a political career if she don't? Because what substantial value has she brought within her congresswomanness besides being like another version of Jasmine Crockett? And we see how that went down. Race baiting, divisive rhetoric. Man, listen, the Senate is more diverse than it ever could be, and it's beautiful. But what substantial, effective, productive conversation has she added to better this country that I have even come across to? You can let me know in the comments because we just having a conversation, but I haven't come across it. Besides her name calling and saying everything else that's bad and worse. She can't distance herself from it because that's her base when it comes to this radicalness. That's who funds her. That's who supports her. And that's the problem with politics today. People are more loyal to their party and their donors than they are to the country. And this brings me to scripture because I feel like we need to ground ourselves in something real. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 14 says, "Where there is no guidance, a people falls. But in an abundance of counselors, there is safety." That's what the Senate is, family. It's an abundance of counselors. It's different voices from different states with different perspectives, making sure no one group runs everything. The founders understood that wisdom comes from many counselors. A fool doesn't seek wisdom. A wise person seeks wisdom and seeks wise counsel. Not from one voice or one mob or one party. And when people try to get rid of those counselors, when they try to centralize power into fewer and fewer hands, that's not progress. That's a setup for failure. And for those of you who aren't spiritual, here's the life wisdom. Any system that gives one group unchecked power will eventually abuse that power. It doesn't matter if that group is Democrats or Republicans or socialists or capitalists. You want to know that it's in human nature, within our flawed nature, that if you give too much power to a person's or persons, that they can abuse the power. Check out my Sonny hosting video with her son Gabriel hosting, getting arrested for trespassing, and she tried to basically absolve him by using every title of hers in the book as a federal prosecutor, him being a Yale researcher and him being a kid and him graduated from Harvard labels as a way to accuse him for basically trespassing and being on active railroads over there in New Rochelle, New York. Go check out that video. And that's just a co-host on The View trying to use her little power, in a sense, to abuse it by trying to sway the police officers who gratefully so and beautifully upheld their professionalism and did their job with equal treatment. So then you see how easy it is just off of that individual situation, how it can easily have power be unchecked, and it is easily deemed to happen due to temptation with our flawed human natures. So when you see people trying to tear down the institutions that provide violence, that provide checks, that provide multiple voices at the table, ask yourself one question: why do they want to silence the other voices? What are they afraid of hearing? That's the question they don't want you to ask, and that's the question that matters most. So let me know what you think, family. Do you think the Senate should be reformed or abolished? Do you think AOC is hiding her true position? Drop it in the comments, hit that like button, share this video with somebody who needs to hear this conversation. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on those post notifications so you don't miss when we drop the next one. Always spread that peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate, family. And remember, truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be spoken. Catch you in the next one, family. Peace.